Now, by agreement of the candidates, we will start with opening statements, and then we will end with closing statements. They will each have 90 seconds, and we will start first with Mr. Cenkush.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's truly a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to make the case for liberty tonight. A little bit about myself. My name is Ron Cenkush. I'm a 1983 graduate of LaSalle High School here in South Bend. After high school, I served 5 years as a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman. I've owned and operated my own IT company for 14 years, and I currently work at Genesis Products as an IT manager in Elkhart. I stand before you tonight because I would like to work on delivering you the perfect federal government, but I can't. And the reason that I can't is because we can't agree on what that is. Currently, due to our overreaching federal government, we find ourselves $20 trillion in debt, trapped in a state of perpetual war, and a political climate as divisive as I have ever seen. But it's not our disagreements that divide us. Rather, our desire to solve all these issues at the national level. It ends the debate, it ends innovation, and forces all to accept policies that we may disagree with. I'm going to make the case tonight for using the federal government only for the things it was charged to do by the Constitution of the United States, so that states can become 50 laboratories of innovation, and so that more of us can live under the type of government we choose, even when we disagree.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you very, very much. And to all of you here tonight, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you very, very much for hosting this event. To Mr. Cenkush, thank you for joining us and for your service in our military. Thank you very much. This is home for me. I had an opportunity to, born and raised in this community, grew up on the far west side of South Bend, graduated from Washington High School. I had an opportunity to work a short stint in a labor organization. I worked in a factory, UAW, making army trucks in the early 70s, and then had an opportunity to join the police department. Worked for 23 years on the South Bend Police Department, retired as an assistant chief. After retirement, I joined the staff of Mayor Steve's office and done that for 12 years. Extremely excited about this opportunity. And I'm doing this for two simple reasons. Because we care and we want to help. We care about this community and the people that live here. And we want to help try to provide some relief. I'm not telling you that I know and have all the answers because I don't, but I do tell you that I care enough to try and to give all I have to making sure that we improve the quality of life for every single person in here, regardless to your race, your color, your creed, your ethnicity, your religious order, your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. This is a human issue and not a political issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Your statement actually leads into our first question from an audience member. It says, how would you reduce the wealth gap between the top 1% and the bottom 50% of U.S. citizens? And it goes first to Mr. Cenkush.
I would probably address that by eliminating barriers to economic advancement. Excess regulation prevents people from getting their start into business. For instance, if you wanted to cut your hair, if you wanted to open up a shop to cut hair, you have to go through tons of red tape to do that, and you have to go to school, you have to get certifications, your place of business has to meet up to code. And so without those barriers, allowing people to enter the workplace and to start businesses and compete will allow them to compete against the bigger companies and give us a chance to close that gap.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
Well, I think we have to have regulations, because if we don't have some type of regulations, that means that we're just all over the place, and somebody has to keep control of what's going on. How much regulations is the problem? I think what we have to do is make sure that we level the playing field, and so that everybody gives their fair share, and not just depend on the top, just depend on middle class to carry the load for the rest of this country. We have to make sure that everybody carries their load. So that means the top 1%, 2%, 3% of this country that's doing better should give more, should give better. And when they do that, everybody has an opportunity to benefit. And we shouldn't have a person that runs around for the last 20 years not paying federal income tax, not supporting military, not supporting other agencies in this country because he's above the rest of us. We have to level the playing field and make everybody responsible.
Mr. Cenkush, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. I would just say that certainly, there's room for discussing some regulations in business, but they are far too overreaching now, and they're designed to keep competition out of the market. Most of these regulations have been lobbied for by larger corporations because they know they can comply with them. It's tougher for people that are coming out from nowhere to compete with those regulations. And again, it's not about being unsafe. It's about giving people an opportunity to succeed.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Coleman. What, if anything, is your plan to preserve and strengthen Social Security and Medicare? Are increased age limits or decreased benefits required?
Well, Social Security, Medicare has been around for years. And for us to talk about eliminating that, I think is a travesty. There's folk in this room that have worked their whole life preparing and expecting to receive the benefits from Social Security and Medicare. For us to get rid of that is disrespectful to them and slap in the face. I think that we have to make sure that we provide opportunities for those that pay into that they get what they have coming. And I think that we also have to make sure that we protect it and not give it away to private companies that will enjoy the benefits of the interest off the dollars and then 5 years from now say that the program doesn't work and it goes into and then we lose what we have. So the federal government has ran Medicare, Social Security since its inception, and I think that we need to support that and strengthen the program that we currently have and not allow it to go away.
Mr. Cenkush?
Social Security is in trouble largely because the fund has been raided by the federal government to spend money on other things. I believe that proves that they can't be trusted with your retirement funds. That being said, Libertarianism is about honoring contracts, and we have made a contract to pay Social Security benefits to people who have paid into that system their entire lives. There's going to have to be an age where we will not consider touching those benefits at all, but if we don't look at modifying this plan or giving our young people an opportunity to opt out of it, not eliminate it, but just the opportunity to choose whether they want to receive it or not, choose to continue to fund it, we're doing a disservice to them, because I think because the government continues to raid that fund, because we can't trust them with our money, they place us in jeopardy, and I think the only moral thing to do is to give our young people a chance to opt out so they're prepared and they can handle this problem.
Mr. Coleman, should people be able to opt out of Social Security?
Well, I think that for us to, if we just do that, then we're making it selective, and only those that can afford to pay into it will get anything out. We've got a lot of Americans that benefit from that program because they can't. The deal is that everybody has to pay their fair share. And when you have the top 1, 2, 3, finding ways to get away from paying taxes, everybody's not paying their fair share. And for us to say that we have to make sure that, government can't be trusted. They've been trusted with doing it for ever since the inception. We just need to make sure that we support what they're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next audience member question will go first to Mr. Cenkush, and it is about the issue of drones. It says, what is your position on government using drones to kill people everywhere around the world? So, to kill people everywhere around the world. So, question about the use of drones, and this goes first to Mr. Cenkush.
So it's an interesting technology now that we can fight war, wage war on people, from a safe distance with a robot essentially. Here's the thing. That in and of itself may have a place in the world potentially. I'm really not 100% sure, but I can tell you this. I believe that our foreign policy and the fact that we're invading all these nations, that we're doing regime change in places where we have no business, and using drones to do that job is patently wrong. The United States should mind its own business. It should trade with foreign countries. It should seek peace with them and stop trying to implement our form of democracy on foreign nations.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
When I think of drones, I don't think of drones being designed and developed to kill people. And so that one sort of took me by surprise. I think that for people, technology is advancing. We're doing a lot of different things with technology, all over the world. And if military finds that using drones as a way of, providing national security, I think it makes sense. But to use it just to develop as a method of killing people, obviously, I don't support that or endorse that. But to use technology as a way to strengthen, our military and the safety and security of this country, it makes sense. As a retired police officer, we have to do things in law enforcement to enhance the security of the communities that you protect. And sometimes that's over and above the top of what the average citizen is. I don't think we should stifle the advancement of technology using drones.
Mr. Cenkush, 30 seconds.
Sure. You're talking about now using them for other purposes like possibly surveillance. And again, there may be some application for that, but but we have to be also careful that we don't violate the Fourth Amendment to legal search and seizures with these things. So there's definitely concern on my behalf about how we use them in violating your civil liberties.
Okay. Can everybody hear us? Yes? Okay. Okay, the next question will go first to Mr. Coleman. And it says, can you explain what Hoosier values are? Because as an out-of-state person, I don't know what Hoosier values are. And you have said that it is your job to bring Hoosier values to DC. Now, this wasn't actually addressed to a specific candidate, but many candidates do talk about Hoosier values. So this new resident would like to know what that means.
I think Hoosier values is fluid, and depending on who you talk to will determine what that means to them. For me, Hoosier values means Lynn's values, that we respect each other, that we treat each other as human beings, that we respect and treat all people, regardless of who they are, the same. And we shouldn't differentiate ourselves based on our color, our sexual orientation, our religious beliefs, if we live on the east side or the west side, but all of us are created by God, and we're human beings and should be treated the same. For me, those values should be spread across our nation so that everybody knows what it feels like to have somebody to embrace you, to make you feel like you're part of being part of this country. And so for me, that's what Hoosier's values are. And I would employ people all over the country to catch fire to those values, because it feels pretty good to have them.
Mr. Cenkush.
I'm not really sure what Hoosier values are to everyone. I think individuals need to decide that for themselves. I would say that three values that I value very much are very simple rules, and they apply, again, to all situations, all people, at all times. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, and honor your contracts. If we follow those three simple rules, we could get along much better than we do today.
Thank you. Anything to add?
No, whoever submitted the question, find somebody to love. That's a value. That's a Hoosier value. And once you do it, spread it, give it to someone else. Thank you.
All right. Let's move to the next question. It will go first to Mr. Cenkush, and it says, what would you do to stop the stalemate in Congress that prevents work from being done?
Well, first I might say that work not being done in Congress might be the best thing that's ever happened to us, frankly. Because I'm not sure that I'm really a fan of much of what they've done. And if you look at congressional approval ratings, I think that bears out. You know, I mean, what is it? It's under 10%? I think it's in single digits or just slightly above that, perhaps?
It's recently risen as high as 22%.
Wow. Amazing.
But you're right, in recent years, it has been in the single digits more often than that.
So it's really tough to pass legislation when you're trying to take away freedom from people, you know, because they're going to resist it. And all of that type of legislation is very divisive, and it's contributing to how divided we are as a people. If you want to look for something that can unite people, what's it going to be? Is it going to be that we take from some and give to others against their will? Is it going to be that we're going to tell them who to marry or how they can treat themselves medically? These are divisive topics. I'm going to make the argument tonight that there's really only one issue that can unite us, and that is to defend each other's liberty.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
You know, for me, the question is, and I'll be honest with you, I was thinking about something else and I lost that one. Could you repeat it?
Yes, absolutely. What would you do to stop the stalemate in Congress that prevents work from being done?
You know what? We just have to respect each other and for who we are, and be willing to reach across the aisle to talk to people. And one of the things we have to realize is that what we're doing as representatives, as congressional people, you know, it's not about us. It's about the people that we serve. And so when we go into the room to sit down and talk to people, and thank you, when we go into the room to talk and to negotiate about different issues, it's not about what I feel or what I want. It's about what the people want and what can we do to make their lives better. And so we have to make sure that we're willing to reach across the aisle and to put away our own selfish pride and to say what's best for her. You know, what is going on in her life that we can do to improve and not have stalemates because of political baggage and what party we're from and what group we're part of. That's not important. What's important is what can we do to enhance the life of the people that we serve. And when we start doing that and not going into it that it's partisan politics, you know, Democrat, Republican, independent, you know, anything else, it doesn't matter. You know, what's best for the people that we serve. I'm done.
Mr. Cenkush, 30 seconds.
Yeah, we have to be careful that what's best for the people we serve isn't bad for some other people we serve, which is often the case when the government gets involved in trying to fix the problems that we're faced with. And so, I'm sorry, do you want to reply to that? Please, go ahead.
Somebody has to set the boundaries. Somebody has to set the rules. You have 350 million people in this country, and somebody has to set the rules for the people that live here.
Sure.
And so we can't just say, look, all of you just go do what you want to do. That doesn't work either.
Yeah.
Okay? And so there has to be.
If I may take my time back, since
Sure.
I'm gracious and gave you that. So I mentioned those three rules earlier. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, and honor your contracts. Of course there have to be rules. If we follow those three rules, we can foster a climate where we get along and we respect each other's opinions and we can agree to disagree. When we set government policy, the debate is over.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question from the audience is, what would you do to address the topic of undocumented individuals in our district, including the topic of their employment? And it goes first to Mr. Coleman.
Well, undocumented individuals.
Immigrants, presumably.
First of all, I think that we need to have a strong immigration reform program. We have to begin to accept folk in this country that are here, that have been here, and have come to this country to make a new life. The United States of America is a country built on immigrants from all over the world since its inception. And for us to say that we are too good to accept someone else in this country, I think is hypocritical. I think that we have to provide a path to citizenship to the people that are in this country. Now, as a retired police officer, I understand safety and security, and there's some value in that. And so we have to make sure that we protect borders, and we do vetting of people coming in and out of the country. But to separate families, divide people, to keep people from realizing the American dream that we've all been able to benefit from, I think is wrong. And we have to find a way to fix that, to make sure that we fix the immigration problem in this country.
Thank you. Mr. Cenkush.
We are a nation of immigrants, and I think we should do as much as we can to embrace immigration. It takes a long time for someone to get into this country who tries to get in legally, and because of that, they seek other options. As far as the people that are here that are undocumented, I can never get behind a plan to round them up and kick them out of this nation, simply because they were born across a boundary. That is not a humanitarian, compassionate way to deal with people. And I agree with Mr. Coleman that we need to find a way to allow them into our government and to get legitimacy here. And for people who want to come to this country and work, we need to make it a lot easier to get a work visa that would entail a background check to make sure that they're not wanted for horrible crimes in some other nation before we let them in and allow them to come seek work in America. But this is another topic that's tied in with many other issues that we don't talk about very much. Immigration, the economy, the war on drugs, these are all deeply intertwined. And we need to make sure that we consider all aspects of these and talk about how they impact all of them. It's a multifaceted issue.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, 30 seconds if you'd like.
Again, I believe that we have to have a pathway of citizenship in this country. For us to say that folk are undocumented and we treat them inhumane because of that, I think is wrong. And I think if we're going to be the United States of America, we have to find a path to citizenship. And for us to punish an 18, 19-year-old kid that's been here all their life because their family was trying to find a better way, a better life for them, and now we tell them that you have to, and this is all they know, and we're going to tell them that you have to leave this country. It's not right to do.
Thank you.
He should be saying that.
All right, we're going to go next to a question. We'll go first to Mr. Cenkush. It says, what are your individual stances on gun rights and the Second Amendment? Do you support a universal background check, and should assault weapons be banned from the general public? We'll go first to you, Mr. Cenkush.
Okay, three-part question. First part again was my
your
personal
stance on gun rights and the Second Amendment.
Okay, let's start with that. Okay, so every living creature has a mechanism to try to defend itself from attack. It may be defensive, it may be camouflage, it may be claws if you're a bear. Our right to bear arms is simply a human being's right to defend themselves against those that would cause them harm. Libertarians strongly embrace the Second Amendment and feel that you obviously, like everything else that lives, have a right to defend yourself. What was the second part?
Universal background check and assault weapons ban.
I don't support any additional legislation for restricting our ability to get guns. I think that we have enough in place now. Assault ban, assault weapons, meaning what, weapons that fire military grade? Is that how you're defining? Semi-automatic.
Large capacity.
Automatic weapons have been banned since 1973. Semi-automatic weapons are legal, and I don't think they need to be restricted. I think you're better off carrying yourself and defending yourself from aggression. Remember, whenever you need the police, in seconds, they're only minutes away.
All right, so next to our police officers,
I'm going to get in trouble with this. I'm going to get in trouble with this. First of all, I think that I respect the Second Amendment, and I think there's a place for that. I think we should have the right to bear arms. But I don't think, we need to make sure that we understand what that means. I don't think we should allow everybody in America that wants a gun to have a gun. Everybody doesn't deserve to have one. I think that we have to do universal background checks so that we can make sure that we're not providing weapons to people that don't deserve to have them. And if I'm going to protect my family, I don't know if I need a Uzi with a 100-round banana clip to do that with. If I'm going rabbit hunting, I don't need a semi-automatic weapon to hunt small game. So we have to make sure that we're extremely careful with that. And so I have a problem with not doing background checks. I also have a problem with high semi-automatic, automatic weapons. I don't want to send a police officer into a situation where he or she has less firepower or weaponry than the people that they're going to fight against. Shouldn't happen. And so we have to do a better job with weapons in this country. Too many kids have died from it.
Thank you. Mr. Cenkush, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would agree that we don't need to send our police in underarmed. They need to be just as well armed as we are.
More is not better. More is not better. If we think guns are going to solve our problems, all it's going to do is make it worse. We have to find a way to understand each other as human beings to fix problems. Guns will not solve our problems, cause more problems than guns.
Okay, we will go next to the issue of education, and this question goes first to Mr. Coleman. It says, what is your position on funding education, K through 12, and higher education? And this person is particularly interested in your position regarding public education.
I think education is paramount to our communities, and I think that the United States of America has to be engaged in education programs, and I would step further. K through 12 is too late. We have to do pre-K education in this country, make sure that we provide early education for the kids, and it has to be affordable to all kids, wherever you are in this country, so that we can make sure that every child in America has the right and the opportunity to strong education. We have to make sure that we make college affordable in this country, so that every kid that wants to go to college can afford to go to college and not have to pay for the next 10, 15, 20 years of their life trying to pay back college loans. And so I support public education, and I think that we have to, if we expect this country to grow and to develop more than it is, it has to start with education, and it has to be public education in our communities.
Mr. Cenkush.
The Constitution of the United States has no provision in it for the federal government to be involved in education. Right now, they're taxing you for education through income taxes. They're attaching strings to that, and they're sending it down to the states with mandates that cost more than the money they send. Parents should be the ones who decide how their children are educated. The Indiana Constitution calls for K through 12 education and mandates that that is funded. That is a state-level issue. That's where it should be decided, not through the federal government.
Maybe decided that there has to be support state education. And if we don't support education efforts in this country, we lose. And it's a known fact. There's information out there now that says that if a kid is not properly educated, the chances of he or she ending up in a penal institution, okay, is extremely great. If they go to prison, we will spend $30,000 a year to house somebody in prison. It costs us somewhere close to $15,000 a year to educate a kid in college. Where do we want to spend our money at? Okay, we have to do public education.
Okay, and now, yes.
So under no way, shape, or form did anything I say indicate that I'm not for education. The question is, where is it addressed? How does our Constitution spell that out? That's all I'm pointing out. Of course, we need to educate our children. It needs to be handled by the state level as per the instructions of our government. If we want to change it, we have something called an amendment process. The last time we used it was 1973. If we want to make education a federal issue, first we have to pass an amendment to allow the federal government to do that.
Okay, and Mr. Coleman, you were supposed to have the last rebuttal on this, so go ahead.
But if we depend on state government to take care of public education, we will get what we're getting now, where they take the money, mismanage it, and all kids don't get the same affordability of the same education across the country, across the state. If we're going to do it, we have to make sure that all kids receive the same level of service across this, and that doesn't happen. In fact, it doesn't even happen locally. A kid on one side of town in one school will get the different education than a kid in another school. That should not happen. So government has to be involved in educating our kids.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I feel like the presidential debate moderators would like to remind the audience to please refrain from cheers and jeers so that we can get as many questions in as possible. The next set of questions really has to do with your biggest priorities and your biggest challenges. So what do you think is the biggest challenge that faces the district, and how will you address this if you are elected? So what is it that you would really like to tackle as soon as you're elected? We go first to you, Mr. Cenkush.
I would probably start with taxation reform. Currently, our current administration has been caught using the IRS to target political enemies. There's a history of that also happening with the Republican Party when President Nixon was caught using the IRS to target his political enemies. So I would like to change taxation to a sales-based tax using a model of something called the fair tax system. There's no way in the world I can explain that to you in 90 seconds. If you want to check it out, you're going to have to look at it. But it would allow shifting taxation to sales-based taxes. There's something called a prebate to make sure that the poorest among us don't pay an exorbitantly high amount of taxes. And this will allow you the freedom to choose how much you pay and to protest, if you will, if you're not happy. If you're not happy that the government's bombing countries with your money, if you're not happy that it's trying to tell you what you can put in your body and what you can't, if you're not happy with anything it's doing under our current system of taxation, you have to pay for it, and that's it. If we move to something like a fair tax that allows you the ability to at least say, look, I'm going to cut back on what I buy because I don't like what they're doing, and I don't have to go to jail for being a protester.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, would you like to respond to the issue of moving from income taxes to consumption-based taxes, and then we'll have a rebuttal, and then we'll go next to you for your number one objective?
Thank you. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but you know what? It's a necessary evil. It has to happen. And what we have to do is we can't stop paying taxes. We just have to make sure that it's fair and equitable and that everybody pays their fair share. And for us just to say that we're going to allow, you to pay whatever you think you should pay, that's not right, okay? That then goes back to putting us in a position where the rich gets richer and the poor suffers more. And we can't do that. We have to be better than that. And so I think that for us to go to the tax system that he just described will only make the divide greater between folks in our communities. Shouldn't happen.
Mr. Cenkush, is it a regressive plan? It sounds like that's the concern, that poor people spend more of their income in.
It would be more regressive if it didn't include the prebate, which is designed to offset that and to make sure that the poorest among us are not burdened with extra taxation. And to suggest that somehow it's more moral, or there's a moral high ground in arbitrarily deciding how much tax you have to pay and being able to pick and choose who pays more or less, to suggest that that's a morally superior idea to allowing a sales-based tax, which gives individuals more control over what they do, I think is a false argument.
Let's move then to Mr. Coleman and the biggest challenge that you see facing the district and how you would tackle it once elected.
I think there's more than one. I think there's several. First of all, I think education is a huge issue for us, and we have to make sure that we support strong public education and neighborhood education in this community. I think jobs and economy is extremely huge. We have to make sure that we provide jobs for people in this country and not close down factories and businesses through trade deals and send jobs overseas. And people right here in the United States, and more specifically the second district, are looking for job opportunities. And I think that we have to make sure that we start building trust among each other, building relationships instead of breaking us apart for all different kind of reasons. And as long as we continue to do that, we'll continue to be splitters. And so I think you fix those things by beginning to have conversations, including people that's in this room in the processes of trying to fix those issues, instead of government just saying that, you know, we're government, we're going to fix it, we don't need any of these people here. It's going to affect all of you, and we have to include all of you in order to be able to address those issues. And so I don't think there's one issue. I think there's a level of issues that's going on in our communities that we have to try to find ways to address.
Mr. Cenkush?
And your response.
You pick up on the fact that government can't solve what people
It was his words.
Right. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is the U.S. spends more on our military than the next 7 countries combined. Is U.S. military spending too big, too small, or just right? There is a corollary question here. It says, Mr. Cenkush, your position seems to be that almost all taxes are theft. We know that our military has not been protecting us since 1946. Should we abolish the military? So since it goes to you first, we'll flip that question in there too. So too much spending, too little, just right? Are we doing too much with our military? Should it be abolished altogether?
Yeah, so libertarians believe in a strong national defense, but the key word there is defense, not offense. Right now, we're involved in way too much offense. We're involved in military interventionism across the globe. We're bombing countries. We're trying to institute regime change in places where we have no moral authority to do so. And so I think that we can have a very strong defense and still spend a lot less money than we do currently. All we have to do is defense instead of offense. And the second part of that one again was, please?
Is whether it should be...
Should we not have a military? Yeah, well, I don't know if you picked up on the fact that I'm a veteran, so I mean, it's going to be difficult for me to stand here and say that we should have a military. I do believe that we should have a military, and I believe defense of our nation is very important. We could fund it voluntarily. I mean, I'm just saying. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just simply saying that it's possible that we could fund it through voluntary means.
Like the tax check-off for public funding to the president.
That's right. That's right.
People give so generously. All right, Mr. Coleman.
To use a sports analogy, if you have a strong offense, you protect your defense. So I think you have to have both. I think you have to have a strong offense and a strong defense in the military. Obviously, for me to tell you if we're spending too much or too little, that's hard to say. I think that comes with having an opportunity to actually look at budgets and what's going on, how many people, how much money we're spending, and where we're spending it at, where could we save, and that kind of thing. So I think that we have to have a strong military in this country to make sure that we protect and continue to make the United States of America the strongest country on the planet. And for us to cut back on that and to allow our position to be weakened in any position, I think it's detrimental to citizens of this country. Now, does that mean that there shouldn't be some studies to determine, you know, where we are militarily and how we improve and where we strengthen that? Well, I think that's absolutely necessary. But to talk about, you know, getting rid of our national security and military, I think it's not a wise choice.
Sure. At one point in my life, the Democratic Party was famous for being anti-war. I wonder what happened to that. There is no anti-war party in the big two now. They're all completely on board and embracing interventionist foreign policy, regime change in foreign nations. The Libertarian Party is the only party now that stands in an anti-war stance.
Can I, real quick, as a retired police, I'm not saying that I'm pro-war, okay? I'm just saying that I'm pro-safety. And that's what the military's job is to make sure that they protect this country. It would be great if we didn't have to go to war, okay? But if you had to go and you're not prepared to do that, it puts all of us in jeopardy. So we have to have someone that's prepared to defend this country. And that's what our military is supposed to do.
No more sense.
All right. The next question says, what parts of the budget do you think should be cut in order to increase funding for programs that will help communities such as ours, which are restricted by tax caps? And this goes first to you, Mr. Coleman.
Again, I think there's fluff in the federal government, and I think we have to find a way to do that. Just right off the top of my head, there's some information going out that says that the current Congress supported efforts to do crazy things that doesn't benefit all of us, but just benefits a certain number of people. Specifically, they just had a gym where people can go work out, and only congressional people can use that. It's probably not something that we need to be funding. Okay, so there's a way to look down the line item of the budget and cut some things out of that. Okay, but it's hard to determine what that is without seeing it. But for us just to throw away the budget, okay, or say that we're going to cut out a whole section or something to save money, I don't think that's prudent. I think we have to make sure that we look at the budget and how it benefits the most of us to determine whether or not how much useful it is for all of us.
Mr. Cenkush.
Obviously, we already touched on military spending. That is one way that I believe that we can cut. Another area that comes to mind is the war on drugs. We spend an enormous amount of money on war on drugs. It isn't working. It's been a complete failure. Drug use is not lower than it's been over the last 40 years of the drug war. It's time we stop treating that as a criminal issue and start treating it as a health issue. I personally think we can treat it as a health issue through voluntary means, that we could cut all the money out of the drug war and we could donate to centers. But even if we did it with government funds, we would still spend a lot less money than we do currently, and we would get a lot more effective results.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Well, and again, I think the drug culture is a big issue. I think the criminal justice system needs to be looked at. I think our penal system, and so we have a lot of systems that need to be worked. We have penal systems now in this country that they're not reforming people, we're just warehousing people. So we need to figure out a way to address those kind of issues. And again, without looking at the total budget and where those dollars go, but we have to make sure that we're willing to reach across the aisle and work with one another and not be partisan politically as to how we do that. Again, it's not about us, it's about the people that we serve.
Do you agree with Mr. Cenkush that drug use, not dealing, that it should be decriminalized and treated more as a prevention?
Well, I think the drug use in this country is an epidemic right now. I think it's not a criminal issue. I think it's more of a public safety issue, public health issue. And yes, we need to make sure that we do more treatment than we do locking people up. But just to do that blanketly, I don't think it's good. We have to work at that. But for us to send people to jail for minor offenses of drug use is wrong. I think we have to attack where the drugs are coming from and who's bringing it and deal with those people and not punish the street users. We have to realize that we've done it.
Can I respond?
Yes, could we add it?
Sure. So we have alcoholics in this country, which is another form of drug abuse. And largely they're non-criminal, they're non-violent. And the reason for that is their drug is so inexpensive that they can panhandle for it for just a few dollars. And so the war on drugs has made the price of drugs exorbitantly expensive. It causes the users to seek out crime to fund their habits, and it fills our prisons with people who shouldn't be there.
Tell that to a family. Tell that to a family whose kid just got killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. Okay, that's not that big of a deal.
Tell them what's not
You said that, we got people that's drinking and they get cheap and doesn't mean it.
My point was that they don't commit crimes to get their drug.
Oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do.
Have you been robbed by a wino?
Yes, they do it every day. They take advantage of each other every day. They rob each other, they steal from each other, they assault each other, they hurt each other. Alcoholics are one of the major offenses in this country that cause problems. And they leave that, and they go to marijuana, and they leave that, and they go to cocaine, and they go to heroin. A heroin dealer does not start using heroin for the first time. It's normally other drugs that have gotten them to that point. And so all of it is bad. And so for us to say that we're going to minimize any of it, less than other, is wrong. We've got millions of people that are suffering from drug addiction, from alcohol abuse every day, and they'll do whatever they have to do to feed that addiction. I'm sorry. But that, obviously, that's...
But you're not supporting prohibition of a return to prohibition for alcohol, so it sounds like you would like to see more funding for treatment?
Absolutely. We have to treat it all. We have to treat it all.
Again, treatment, not criminalization, is the key.
Thank you. Sometimes when I think there's a good, interesting exchange, I already told them ahead of time that I have prerogative to extend time on a question, as we decided to do there. Now, the next question says, what is your opinion of the repeated attempts to defund Planned Parenthood? It goes first to Mr. Cenkush.
So Planned Parenthood has been targeted as a bad example, if you will, of people who don't want to donate to that particular charity. And I think this just speaks to the fact that I would like to see us have more freedom in who we decide to fund. I don't think it's, you can claim the moral high ground that the government chooses those things for us. There are people that disagree with that. I think they should be allowed to disagree. Of course, people are going to donate to help people in need. But I would like to see force removed from the equation. It's another thing that we disagree on. And I don't think we need to be criminalizing people who disagree.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
I think Planned Parenthood plays a vital role in our communities, providing resources and support for families in this country. And I think that just like we do with Heart Association and other medical things, I think it makes sense for us to provide support for that agency. I'm not saying I think we have to totally carry it, but I think we have to provide support for it like we do other institutions.
I think we strongly need to support them. I just want to see it voluntary.
The next question says, would you support legislation to prohibit employment discrimination based solely on gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender status? That goes first to Mr. Coleman. Employment discrimination.
I wouldn't support any legislation that done any kind of discrimination on any matter, in any way at all. None. No discrimination at all, regardless to whether it's sexual or religion or racial or discrimination in any form is wrong. And as an African American man in this community, I've experienced this discrimination, and discrimination in any form is wrong. I don't care how you dress it, how you make it look, discrimination is wrong, and we have to stand against it at all levels, anyway.
So you would support amending the 1964 Civil Rights Act then to include protections for LGBT?
Yes, they need to be protected, absolutely.
Mr. Cenkush.
Yeah, so it is important to protect people, and discrimination is very ugly. we have to decide what the government's role in that is. And even in the Libertarian Party, this is a topic of debate, and there's no strong feeling one way or the other. So this is an issue that I actually can be persuaded on. I'm not sure exactly the right way to go. Those are the constituents, and I would try to deliver just a little bit more.
Okay, Mr. Coleman.
Again, as we talked about in our earlier statements, that everybody deserves an opportunity. And how do we deny them LGBT community based on who they choose to love? And that's inherently wrong. And I would support them being included in that legislation. We shouldn't have to. They're human beings. They should be given that affordability anyway. Shouldn't have to create a law to be treated right, but I certainly would.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did I get a chance to? No, am I?
You would add an extra rebuttal.
Yeah, I just think that we need, of course, we need to strongly make sure that the government isn't involved in any of that form of discrimination in any shape or form. Absolutely, without question.
The question is more to what extent the government should regulate it for individuals.
Right. But as far as our government and the way it runs and what it does, it should absolutely not discriminate in any way, shape, or form, and that should be very solid.
The next question goes first to Mr. Cenkush. Should the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, be retained, mended, or ended? If you would seek changes, which ones? If you would repeal, how would you ensure access to care?
Again, going back to the U.S. Constitution, I don't believe that the federal government has any role in deciding how you seek health care. I think that the markets should be free to do that. You know, our presidential candidate, Gary Johnson, talks about having gallbladders are us and tonsillectomies are us, like Uber and other forms that might pop up if we deregulate and allow competition in the medical sector. Yeah, so the moral question really is, are we going to say that we're going to provide health care on a national level and we're going to force everyone to pay for that? We're not going to allow them to opt out. We're not going to allow them to choose. I'm not sure that's the right approach.
Thank you. I'm just picturing my Facebook status update with the 4 kids. I could say, sorry, headed to Tonsils R Us today. Catch you later. All right, Mr. Coleman.
I support the Affordable Care Act. I think it makes absolute sense to have it. Do I think it's perfect? Absolutely not. I think there's ways to improve it. I think we need to go back to the table with stakeholders, not just government officials, but stakeholders, clinicians, and insurance folks, and citizens, to talk about what that really means for us. But since we started, there's 20 million people that have had the opportunity now to go to the doctor and be treated, to get services. And for us to say that that's not important, I beg to differ with it. Now, for me, for us to get rid of it and say that everybody pay their fair share, then we have people that lay at home and die because they can't afford services to get to the doctor, to get the services that they deserve to have. And this is the richest country in the world. We should at least be able to take care of our citizens, to make sure that when he or she is sick and need medical treatment, need medical service, that we're willing to take care of those. It's about being our brother's keeper, taking care of those that's the least of us. And I think that's our responsibility as government, is to make sure that we provide those kind of opportunities to everybody, not just some people.
Mr. Coleman, would you support the Medicare for all plan, universal health insurance that goes further than Obamacare in realizing that vision?
Again, to make sure that everybody has Medicare, we do that. I think you have to look at the cost of that and what that means for everybody. But I think that we have to make sure that everybody in this country has medical insurance, that they can go to the doctor and get treated. And if that means that everybody, if we call it Medicare for everybody, it doesn't matter to me what it's called. It's just what matters to me is that everybody receives services.
Mr. Cenkush?
Should it essentially be a citizenship right to have health care?
It's an interesting topic. So if you think about what a right is and what is the definition of a right, you know, there's disagreement on that. Again, it's a thing that we don't universally agree on. But if you look at all the other rights that are listed, like in our Bill of Rights, all of those rights you would have if you were the only individual on the planet. You could worship as you saw fit, you could defend yourself, you could have freedom of speech, you could have all of the things listed there. But who would do your gallbladder surgery? So claiming that it is a right, I think misses the mark somewhere. It is important that we help people who need care. It is important. And I think that you look to charity to do that. And I'm a big fan of that. But to say that it is a right and to put that in the hands of the government, Mr. Coleman mentioned it would be tragic if you couldn't get health care and you couldn't afford it and you died. What he fails to mention is that it could be equally as tragic if the government makes that decision for you. And I'm not so sure that either of them are exactly the right person. You know, I mean, neither of them are perfect, is what I mean to say. So I would go on the side of choice instead of government-made solutions.
And then again, if we do choice, that means that those that can afford it gets treated, those that can't afford it don't get treated, and then we further create this gap between the have and the have-nots. That's where we are in this country. The have and the have-nots, and the middle class loses out. We have to make sure that we protect that for all citizens in this country, and stop creating situations where if you can afford it, if you got it, if you're all right, that you'll be all right. And for those of us that don't have it, we suffer. Okay? And when that happens,
Finish your sentence. Okay.
When that happens, I think it causes a problem because our natural instincts will then take over. And we're not going to allow ourselves to do without if we can. And so if I don't have it, I'll find a way to get it from those that do have it. Okay, and that creates criminal stuff and illegal stuff. And so we have to consider all of that when we begin to talk about, deciding who does and who doesn't get it and that kind of thing. If we make it even for everyone, we minimize or mitigate some of those other problems that's inherent along with that. So I'm done. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's fine. And Mr. Cenkush, you are scheduled to go to the final rebuttal for this question.
So he infers that it would be criminal for him to come to me and demand that I pay for his health care.
No.
You said that. That's what you just said. You said that people would turn to that if we didn't provide it for them. But that is exactly what you're proposing when you're saying that other people are going to have to pay. It's just the government is doing it instead of individuals. Also, if I may finish, if I still have time, I think it's not about not having care. We're going to find a way to provide care for people. It's going to be done through charity. To suggest that that government has the moral authority to force you to comply is just something that we're going to have to agree to disagree on. It's again, something I mentioned in my opening statement.
And you're right. But how do we expect it to happen through charity when folks don't even want to see everybody with insurance? Who's going to be?
Well, we stop taxing them to death for starters and allow them to have more money to make these decisions themselves.
When we stop taxing them, we take all of theirs and they go to their corner of the world and don't provide opportunities for everybody else. That's why we have to have taxes, so that everybody pays their fair share.
Some will choose to do that, but the overwhelming majority don't. I believe in individuals. I believe in people. I believe that they will do the right thing.
They haven't been.
And we see actually some of the ideological differences between the candidates and the political parties. Let's then ask you this question. What needs to be done to keep our country safe from terrorists? We go first to Mr. Coleman.
Well, and I hate to keep saying this, but that's who I am, a police officer. I understand the importance of making sure that we protect ourselves against that. I think what we've missed the boat on is that everybody is trying to do it themselves. I think that we have to make sure that we provide the resources to our military and allow them to do what we hired them to do, is to provide the safety and security for this country and the people that live here. And stop interjecting our personal thoughts of what we feel and how we think it should be done. We hire them to do the job. Let's give them the resources that they deserve to have, they need to have. Give them the support that they have to make sure that they provide safety and security for this country.
Mr. Cenkush.
I would say probably the biggest thing we can do is stop the foreign interventions. I think those are by far fueling the fire. They're having the unintended consequences of making us less safe, not more safe, and I really think that's where we need to start.
Mr. Coleman, 30 seconds.
Well, and that makes sense only, but we have to realize that we are part of a global community. And for us to think that we can not have interactions with other countries and be affected by what's going on in those countries and what's happening in our country is probably not going to happen, okay? And so I think we have to make sure that we're prepared for those things that could affect us. And that's what, as far as security is, that's what our military should be doing.
Thank you. Question, the next question says, should Citizens United be overturned? Do you support legislation to require greater disclosure of campaign contributions by organizations? So Citizens United allowing corporations to actually run issue ads, but campaigning, electioneering ads, and opening up the room for Dr. Money. Should it be overturned?
Here's what I think. I think that legislation is designed to get the money out of politics. Isn't that the idea behind that? So, we hear people talk about how we want the money out of politics.
Actually puts more money into politics.
Right, what I'm saying is people want something that takes the money out of politics, right? And so, I just have to say, every single one of us has the ability to do that. Every election, you're presented with candidates who don't raise money, who aren't bought and paid for by corporations, but you're not choosing them. Does it really matter how much somebody spends on a horrible candidate? Honestly, are we that swayed by television? You are? I'm sorry for you if you are. I think most of us are independent. We have minds we can think for ourselves. And just because we see a TV commercial or hear somebody say something is awesome, doesn't mean it's awesome. And we have the ability to change that by simply voting for candidates who don't raise money. And we never do that. So we're being hypocritical. But I do think that there should be transparency. So in other words, if they are donating, they should be very clear on who they've donated to, and all that should be open for everyone to see.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
I think that we have to repeal the law and get rid of Citizens United. I don't think there's no place in political government for that to happen. I think it does slant elections, and we have to do some campaign reform to keep that out. If you don't raise money, you can't win. It's just that simple. And you can't be engaged in the process if you don't raise money. Now, we have to make sure that through the system that we don't allow certain groups, organizations, businesses to monopolize the process, okay? And so I think there should be a limit on to how much they give, how often they give, and there has to be a level of transparency so that certain groups like the Koch brothers don't take over our federal political system. And so it has to happen.
Mr. Cenkush, 30 seconds.
I've raised less than $2,500 for my political campaign, and here I am engaged in the debate. To suggest that you have to spend money to be engaged or involved, I completely disagree with. And again, if you folks make the decision to choose the candidate who isn't bought and paid for, that's one of the reasons I'm in the race.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so we have time for a reception. The next question was first to Mr. Coleman, and it says, do you think we should raise the federal minimum wage? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I think the minimum wage is far too low. A family cannot take care of itself off of $7.50 an hour. An individual cannot take care of themselves off of $7.50 an hour. So I do think the minimum wage has to be raised, and I don't think you do it all at one time. I think you do it in increments and get from $7.50 to a larger level. Some people say $10.50, some say $15, and I think that depending on where you are, $15 in South Bend is a lot different than $15 in Chicago. But I think we have to raise minimum wage in this country, and it has to happen soon.
Mr. Cenkush.
So I think the minimum wage law and the concept of that is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of politics. Most of us believe that raising the minimum wage law is compassionate and helps people. But the fact may be that it doesn't. And here is the argument for that. Or maybe it does help some, but it can really hurt the lowest among us. And here's the situation, how it can do that. So, although the government can assign an arbitrary wage to your labor, it cannot change the value of that labor, no matter how hard it tries. So, if you are an unskilled worker who doesn't have any skills, and you can find work that pays you $8 an hour because you bring $8 an hour of value to the job, and we raise the minimum wage above that level, then the poorest among us and the least skilled among us can be hurt because they can be put out of the market. And so we have to be cognizant of that when we talk about minimum wage laws. The intent is good. I'm not so sure that they always shake out that way. I encourage you all to take a look at that and check out the other side of the issue and decide for yourself whether you think that it truly does accomplish the goal that it's set out to do.
Mr. Coleman, 30 seconds.
And I don't know if we can adequately deal with this in 30 seconds, but for us to say that we would hurt somebody, giving them an opportunity to make enough money to take care of their family, to put a roof over their head, food on the table, to send their kids to school, to give them the same affordability that everyone else has. I don't know how that hurts them. And again, it further creates the gap between the have and the have-nots. And that's what we have to get away from in this country. And increasing the minimum wage helps us do that.
Thank you. The next question goes first to you. Well,
It wasn't? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. It's fine. I'm good.
you can do like many establishment politicians and rope it into your next response. Do you have guidelines to prevent a fiscal collapse as occurred in 2008?
Is that to me first? So, largely, government-enacted policies were behind the collapse. Worse, we bailed out the people who did the worst things, and so this is just an overall manipulation of the free market, which I disagree with. It shouldn't be propping things up. It shouldn't be rescuing people who fail. It should just be allowed to work, not pick winners or losers. Let things happen the way they happen. If a company goes out of business, it's because there's no value in what they're selling. People are not choosing it. And so there's a message there. That message is, the market doesn't like what you have to offer. You're doing something wrong. Your good is antiquated, or it's not good, or the quality is bad. So that's how the market functions. And when we get involved with government and we bail out bad companies that made mistakes, it's the wrong approach.
Mr. Coleman.
Well, again, I think that for me, what we seen in 08 was tragic. But for us, if we hadn't bailed out those people, as you categorize it, what would have happened to all the people that worked in those industries across the country, all that industry, in the banking industry, that went to work every day to take care of their family? And so we're going to punish millions of people that work in this country because 3 or 4 people took advantage of systems, okay, and abused the financial system. For us to punish the most because of the action of the least, I don't think it makes sense for us to do. I think that we have to make sure that we make those people accountable, excuse me, and not punish everyone. And if the government hadn't stepped in, okay, and provided the service that they did in 08 to to save our economy. That's what would have been happening. We would have been punishing the masses of people in this country. We would have punished them because of what a few greedy, selfish people had done in trying to capitalize on our economy. And so I would not support your premise at all.
Mr. Cenkush, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so, you allow companies to function when they couldn't function on their own. So you're propping up something that failed, and you're saying the premise behind it is because we want to save the jobs of those people. But in reality, what more than likely would have happened is those assets would have been purchased at a much lower price. The people who would have taken the loss would have been the owners of those assets who were devalued, not the workers, and then probably put back to work with the new owners back in the factories with lower overhead and a better idea and a better plan to make a better product. That's the way the market works. And I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. Now, they have gone a full 75 minutes, playing 20 questions here, so that is great. We hear a lot about stamina in this election cycle, and these candidates clearly have it. I want to go ahead and just sneak in one 30-second question so this last person doesn't feel that their question was ignored. It says, do you think a peacetime draft is needed? Why or why not? Mr. Coleman.
I think that's certainly something that we need to have a conversation about. And I think for a lot of different reasons. Not to send people to war, but I think that it has the potential to do a lot of stuff, or it has the potential to help a lot of people to consider that. Education purposes, I think military has been great for a lot of people, to help a lot of people, and that might not be a bad thing to consider. Now, the parameters of how we design that, develop it, is another conversation. But I wouldn't totally throw it out.
Military or public service, or military only?
Again, part of the conversation.
Mr.
So the question was military service, correct?
An actual peacetime draft.
Yeah, for military groups.
Presumably.
Yes. No, absolutely not. I'm not a fan of conscription. Having served in the armed forces, when I was out serving our nation, I wanted to make sure that I was with people who chose to do that, not were forced to do that against their will. You have to trust the person that's next to you when you're in a dangerous situation. And morally, I'm opposed to forcing people to do that against their will.
30 seconds.
I don't think it's about forcing them. I think it's another option and an opportunity to give people an opportunity to be involved in military services. And so, again, how you scale it, how you make it work is a different thing. I don't think you just go and snatch people off the street and say, you're now in the military, but I think you provide opportunities and chances.
So are we talking about a draft, though, which would be
yes,
involuntary?
absolutely. I think I'd much rather see us spending that kind of money and services on people in the military service than I would stocking them away in prison somewhere for 5 or 10 years for smoking a joint somewhere, which is absolutely crazy. There might be a better way for us to get service out of those people than stacking them in prison somewhere. So.
Some kind of national service requirement.
One quick sentence. Make no mistake, a draft is force.
Closing statements. We start with Mr. Cenkush, and you have 90 seconds. Let voters know why you are the best of the 3 candidates to serve as the next congressperson for the 2nd district.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share the message of liberty. It is something I'm passionate about, and I hope it's important to you as well. Freedom alone will not create a utopia, but neither have all the government policies of the last 100 years. With that said, I'm making the case for allowing individuals the dignity of making those choices for themselves. When we do this, we create a culture that fosters respect instead of hate. I'm going to humbly ask that if you find freedom important, that you consider defending it for all, not just the freedoms that you care about. When we do this, We send a clear message that we want our children to grow up in a peaceful, prosperous nation where they can live their lives free from coercion and pursue their happiness. On election day, you will choose to send one of us to Washington, where we will bear this responsibility. I'm asking that you send a candidate that understands that government force is not something to be taken lightly, and always will consider options that preserve your freedom before taking government action. I believe I am that candidate in this race, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Coleman, your closing statement, 90 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Binion. Thank you for your hospitality, and thank you very, very much for being here. And to all of you, you know what? For me, I just want to serve. I just want to help someone. And we stand here tonight, Mr. Cenkush and I, we stand here tonight, and we were willing to stand in front of you, to take questions, to hear from you, to understand what you think. There's a third person in this race, not here. She didn't think enough of you to join us here tonight. To me, that means a lot. How can you serve us if you don't want to hear us? I'm telling you, for me, I don't have all the answers, I don't have, all the polished parts, but what I do have is a heart to help you. And I promise you that if you find it in your heart to elect me as the next congressional person from this district, every single day, I will represent you and give you all I have, just as I did with the South Bend Police Department, the mayor's office, and this community for the last 40 years. I respectfully and humbly ask for your support on November the 8th. Thank you, and God bless you.
Let's have a round of applause for this. Tuning in on the live stream. I would like you to encourage folks to check out the American Democracy Project and the League of Women Voters on Facebook, and check out our websites for the archived footage of this event and our other debates. We have many of them. And also, please come to our future events. Join us if you're here in person for the reception. You can ask questions of the candidates more informally, one-on-one. And just one more time, we do appreciate the fact that these folks came. They did not have any questions ahead of time. These questions have come from our audience members. We certainly do appreciate that willingness to stand before us and answer our questions tonight. So thank you both very much.